safe browsing issue number 1 is handling files. This diagram shows how Alice's computer interacts with files from the web. If you understand how a web browser interacts with files from the web, then you will stand a better chance of avoiding malware from the web. Let's examine this diagram beginning on the right side of the page. Web pages are a type of electronic document, and they are stored on remote computers called web servers. Your computer accesses web pages on web servers through the internet. The red line in this image represents the internet connection between Alice's computer and the web server. Now, you may remember that when computers communicate, they can only understand each other if they stick to a strict set of communications rules, and these rules are called a protocol. The web browser on Alice's computer and the web server are using a protocol called Hypertext Transfer Protocol, or HTTP. Web browsers and web servers almost always use HTTP to communicate with each other. The most common exception to this rule is that some web pages use an encrypted version of HTTP called Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, or HTTPS. We'll talk about HTTPS a little more later in this lesson. For now, I just want you to see that when you browse the web, your web browser and a web server somewhere are trading information back and forth using some version of HTTP. When your browser sends out a request for information, the web server will normally return some web page that you have asked for. The web page itself is coded in a programming language called Hypertext Markup Language, or HTML. A major component of the web browser, then, is the HTML interpreter, which allows the web browser to decode and display web pages that are written in HTML. In this image, notice that Alice's whole web browser is represented by a red box, and the HTML interpreter part of her browser is represented by a smaller black box within the web browser. The HTML interpreter is part of the web browser, but the web browser does more than just decode and display web pages written in HTML. When the HTML interpreter reads through the lines of code for the web page, it will occasionally find non-HTML files embedded into the HTML code. For example, it might find a video file or a PDF embedded into the web page. Videos, PDFs, and other embedded files aren't written in HTML code, so the HTML interpreter cannot display these files without some help. Alice's web browser has several plugins, that is, several helper applications that are programmed into the web browser itself to help it to interpret non-HTML files that are embedded into web pages. In this image, we see that Alice's web browser has 3 kinds of plugins. Executable plugins run programs embedded into web pages, programs written in coding languages like JavaScript. Document plugins allow Alice to view documents, such as PDF files, straight from her web browser. Viewer plugins allow Alice to view or listen to other image, audio, video, or graphics files from her web browser. Sometimes, Alice's web browser will encounter a file embedded in the HTML of a web page that it's not able to interpret with either its HTML interpreter or with any of the other plugins that it has available. When this happens, the web browser might ask a helper application located somewhere else on Alice's computer to open the file. Alternatively, Alice might choose to download a file from a web page. When she does this, the file is downloaded onto her computer, normally someplace on her hard drive, and she can open that file later, even if she is disconnected from the web server or from the internet altogether. So, as you can see, Alice's web browser encounters a number of different file types, and it can handle those file types in a number of different ways. As a user, Alice has some control over how her web browser handles files that are embedded into web pages. Let's imagine for a moment that Alice uses the Firefox web browser. If Alice opens the Options window in Firefox and selects the Applications tab, she can control what action her browser takes when it encounters any given type of file. For example, she can control whether the web browser will execute the file automatically, or if it will ask for permission first. In this illustration, we see that Alice's web browser is set up to automatically open several file types with Adobe Acrobat. We can also see that Alice's browser is set up to open various audio-visual files automatically with a QuickTime plugin, which is also located in her browser. However, whenever her browser encounters a compressed folder, it will ask for permission to open it or to save the file. Alice doesn't want her browser to automatically open or to automatically save compressed files. She wants to process those files manually. This next illustration shows how Alice can change the way that her computer handles files. In Firefox, she clicks on the bar displaying the action for a given file type, and a menu drops down with several options. She can command the browser to always ask her how to handle a given file type, or she can command it to always save a given file type to a particular location, or she can command the browser to always open the file. Her browser is recommending that she always open Microsoft Word documents using Microsoft Word. But if Alice prefers a different word processing software, she can specify that a different program besides Word handle these files. Alice can adjust these settings for any file type that she might encounter in her browser. So, what should you do? Should your browser automatically open files embedded in web pages, or should it ask you for permission first? Now, obviously, the most convenient option is to allow the web browser to just automatically process files. If it's automatic, then you don't have to think about it. But because some files might contain malware, automatically executing all files is also the most insecure option. The best thing for security is to pick and choose manually which files your computer opens. You will have to strike a balance between security and convenience based on your own computing habits and your own needs. Do you encounter a lot of files from unknown sources? If so, you probably want to screen those files. But do you stick to relatively few, familiar, and trusted web pages? Then maybe for convenience sake, you could allow your browser to open files automatically. Now, you may not use Firefox, or maybe you do use Firefox, but our images may have become outdated because of a recent upgrade, which is very possible given the speed at which technology develops. But no matter which web browser you use, it should allow you to control how it handles files one way or another. So do some exploring and figure out how you can do that in your web browser.